Hello and welcome back to Blideback Hobbies. This episode will conclude the 3-part Zenithal highlighting tutorial series. During the episode we're going to show a little bit of class, sophistication and hopefully a modicum of education as we look at some basic colour theory and how you can apply that in your painting to create specific moods and lighting effects.
Clearly we need somebody with a modicum of intelligence to explain these things, so I'll take over from now. Firstly, a quick look at color wheels. We'll begin with the RGB color wheel. This is based on the additive color model for light used by all digital screens such as your mobile phone. Its primers are red, green and blue, starting with black. Adding these lights makes the color lighter. Combining two primaries creates the secondary colors. Red and green equals yellow, green and blue equals cyan, and blue and red equals magenta. Combining all three at full intensity creates pure white light. The wheel organizes these relationships to help you find high contrast complementary pairs, but this is not the wheel we'll be concentrating on today. RYB color wheel. The RYB color wheel is traditionally used by artists for physical mediums like paint. It uses a subtractive color mixing technique. Its primers are red, yellow, and blue. Mixing two primaries creates the secondary colors, such as red and yellow to create orange, yellow and blue to create green, and red and blue to create purple. The wheel is essential for finding complementary colors, hues directly opposite to each other that create maximum contrast. In the RYB model, the key opposing pairs are red opposes green, yellow opposes purple, blue opposes orange, and combining all three primary pigments absorbs all light, resulting in black, or in practice more like a dark, muddy brown, as opposed to the digital model, which combines all colors to create white. Artists often use this wheel to plan dynamic color schemes for their physical artworks. We'll also be using it to plan our schemes.
Whoa, what's this wee white man? You can't even pick up a paintbrush without draining a car battery and laying down for 20 minutes afterwards. I'll take over from here. Right, now even though this might all seem like airy-fairy art nonsense, it all depends on your perspective and whether or not you consider miniature painting art. Personally, I do. So, what we're actually doing when we're priming is we're creating the shadows for our pieces of art to sink into all the recesses. And many different forms of art try to create mood through lighting and shading in particular. One style of art that does this is Baroque, which is quite apt because the vast majority of miniatures that get painted nowadays are Warhammer miniatures, and grimdark is often described as a kind of cyberpunk Baroque style. So if you look around you wherever you are at the minute and look at some of the objects you've got in your house or your room, you'll discover that the shadows on things are very, very rarely black. And one of the ways that Baroque artists attempted to capture mood is to shade things appropriately. So let's take a look at two examples. The Battle of the Amazons by Rubens and Bruegel, and secondly, Landscape with a Calm by Poussin. I've selected these pieces in particular because they have a lot of similarities. They both use roughly the same picture planes and framing for their subjects. Both the foreground and the horizons are set in similar proportions for the subject's matter to be depicted within. Both have trees framing the upper left-hand sides. Both have living creatures depicted in the foreground, although granted the Battle of the Amazons has a hell of a lot more, and both have a clearly defined blue sky on the horizon, meaning that these could both take place in a very similar time during the day. Now, other than the fact that the pieces both have very different subject matter, the main things that separate these two are the mood and lighting, which is helped set by the colour palettes that have been selected. Both use a wide variety of earth tones, however, Landscape with a Calm has a larger and more rich variety of greens and blues, whereas Battle of the Amazons has a large amount of pallid tones and many of the earth tones are leaning into the red spectrum. There are also a lot of dark, almost black shadows. What this does is help set mood. This one is tranquil, and this one, well, not so much. Or put slightly differently,
What he means is Old Testament, Mr.
Yes.
Mayor. Real wrath of God type stuff.
Exactly.
Fire and brimstone coming down from the skies. Rivers and seas boiling.
40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes.
The dead rising from the grave.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Could almost call it grimdark. Now what's all this got to do with miniature painting, all this art talk? It's basically to point out that, like any art form, there are many different techniques, and you shouldn't be restricted to any one given technique. There's nothing wrong with experimenting with different approaches, and the most popular that most people started with, certainly the one that I started with, and the most recognisable one, is the heavy metal style of painting. In a nutshell, when I started in the 80s,
This is such a serious case of old.
there basically wasn't anything else. Now, there were guides back then, and there are guides now. They're very straightforward. It's a great technique to learn to, and there's nothing wrong with it. I still use it nowadays in some of my paint jobs. I usually use it in combination with other techniques that I've learned. It usually entails either priming in black or white, and then starting with a base coat for each colour, maybe shading the recesses, and then working up to a highlight very light at the top on every single raised edge on the miniature. Doesn't usually pay any attention to particular light sources, and it can be very time consuming, but you can also achieve some great results from it. If I'm perfectly honest, I see it nowadays as the miniature equivalent of painting by numbers. But I would not discourage anybody from using it. It's still a great technique, and it's definitely one of the easiest ones to learn how to paint with. Let's just take a look at our friends the Terminators again from that picture earlier, and we can see if we can illustrate exactly what I'm trying to get at. So we'll start with the positives. Every single one of these miniatures is neat, uniform, meticulously done with attention to detail. Every single edge has been highlighted with its due diligence, and the artist who's painted these miniatures has clearly taken a lot of time and effort to complete this effect, and it works. And you'd expect that, as this is Games Workshop box art. However, some of these positives can also be viewed as negatives. They are flat, uniform, and they look like painted toy soldiers. And that's perfectly fine, as that's exactly what they are. They're game pieces. And let's not forget the other key point, that this will have taken even a skilled artist hours to achieve this level of detail. Point is that this is not your only option, and doesn't always have to be. Let's take a look at one more piece of art. The lighting in this piece is dynamic and moody. There's a large contrast between the shadows at the bottom and that high orange where the light hits him at the top. And that's just concentrating on the main figure in the middle. If we look at the figures in the background, there's a blue haze which separates them from him, as he's in the foreground and is clearly supposed to be the main focal point. And there are some great details here. Even the shadows in each of his legs are different colours. One's purple and one has more of a green tone to it. Clearly meant to demonstrate the fact that the objects around him are reflecting different light. The earth reflects the green light on his right leg, and the Chaos Marine underneath his foot reflects the purple light on his left leg. This is something that you can attempt to recreate on your miniatures, and can hopefully go some way to giving them a little more character. Here are some examples of a few miniatures that I had spare when I was first learning this technique. All of the miniatures that you're about to see are purely in the priming stage. None have been completely painted yet, as you'll probably be able to tell. Including this nice looking sharky fellow here, who's been undercoated in a dark blue with some greens and a beige zenithal highlight. And then this dark elf Drider, who I started with a very dark blue under shadow, and then started to get a little bit more experimental with the spidery bits. Should look nice when he's painted up, and especially when I managed to remove all the husky fur from him. An unfortunate side effect of living in this house, as we're full of furry quadrupeds. And a dragon, who's once again started with a indigo shadow, and then onto a deep red with some orange on the wings, and leaving blue on the underside, and then he's got a basic beige and white zenith highlight. Again, this is all primer. And then his cousin, the orange dragon, who's got a little more green on his undershadows and more of an orange base instead of a red. Should look nice once they're actually painted up. So all of these were just experimental to see exactly what I could achieve just purely through priming in different colours and shades before I actually painted the miniatures. In fact, you might notice there are one or two little splurges on a few of them because I was still actually learning how to use my airbrush at the time. Now, this is the first miniature that I experimented with that I actually completed using this technique. And I started out with a very dark purple, almost red, nearly maroon base coat, and then I chose a greeny yellow complementary colour, and then Zenith highlighted him in beige and white to try and create that sort of gloomy, eerie, nasty, sickly tone for the worm. I then used a series of glazes and shades so you could still see the shadow effect all the way through the paint job. I then concentrated my highlights on the side of the miniature that the light source is supposed to be coming from. As you can see, that purple shadow is visible on that entire side of the miniature, including up the skeleton himself and throughout his blue cloak and underneath his armpit. Now, he's a fair size miniature, and this entire thing only took me about 3.5 hours, and I'm very happy with the results considering that this was a first attempt and taking into account the size of the miniature. If I'd have painted this in the old heavy metal style, you're probably looking between 6 and 8 hours, I would imagine. And in my opinion, he probably wouldn't have turned out looking half as atmospheric. So without further ado, let's see if we can show you how this could be done. So we're going to go back to our friend the colour wheel, and we're going to keep things nice and simple. We're going to go for violet or a purple, and the oppositional or complementary colour to that is a yellow. This is of course not what you have to do. You can choose anything, the colour wheels, just to give you ideas, but this does work very nice for sort of gloomy vampire types, and I know this guy is actually a water elf, but he does look vaguely vampire-y, so we'll stick to that. So it's a nice dark purple that we've started with, and then I've gone for a slightly off yellow, and we're gonna highlight exactly the same as we did on the last couple of Zenithal highlight tutorials from that above and slightly right angle. But because we're using a coloured Zenithal highlight as well, we will be covering slightly more of the back of the miniature from an above angle as well, because otherwise you're not going to see the benefit of all the colours unless it covers around. So I will concentrate from that top right angle, but I'll also be going directly above to try and catch a lot more of the back of the miniature. Now, I'm a lot more proficient with my airbrush than I used to be, and in order to avoid those splurges you saw in my test miniature, I've decided to follow the advice that any good marksman should know.
Remember, short, controlled bursts.
And who are we to argue? As this colour first goes on, you can see that it appears slightly green, and that, believe it or not, is something that we want because it's showing the transition between that purple and the yellow, and the more that we layer the yellow on top of it, the more yellow it will become. We don't want it to be a harsh transition, we want it to be a nice steady slow gradient, and the bottom of the miniature where the shadows should be stronger will lay off with the airbrush so that you do get that ever so slightly green transitional tone. And it's all part of why I like this particular combination, as it does create that nice gloomy ethereal sort of Bram Stoker's type atmosphere. Just going to flip him over so that I can catch a little bit of the backside of the sword. Going to concentrate a little bit more on the front now, getting it ready to prepare for the next stage of the Zenith. So we'll turn him over and we'll have a look and see how this is coming together. Very happy with these transitions so far, especially the shadows in between his legs on his little kind of surcoat thing, and the way that it creeps around the back of his left hand lat and under his armpit and the back of the sword. So this looks nice already, and then we're going to make it a little bit more interesting now. So we're going for a mid-tone here. We're going to concentrate a little bit more on that top right angle, so there's going to be more like a traditional sort of Zenith from now on. So we will try and avoid these back bits so we're not ruining that sort of multicoloured layer that we've got going on. And we're going to use Screaming Skull, a nice sort of rich beige colour. Shouldn't affect that yellow too much, but it's going to sort of help that transition onto the white for the top of the Zenith. As with my other Zenithal highlight tutorials, this second layer of mid-tones is a little bit more precise in where I'm letting the paint land. We're going to localise the paint much more. So I'm going to concentrate on the front of this sword, and the focal point of the miniature is pretty much going to be his face, so we're going to try and catch more of this side of the miniature rather than an all-over frontal spray. We'll turn him over and let it creep a little bit around the back, just catch the edges as if the light is creeping around. But again, this is just going to be a hint. We want the back to retain that kind of macabre lighting. Oh, we'll take another look at him at this stage. Again, that's really coming together. Some nice little hints across the side of this armour and a little bit on the plumage on the back. Ready for the next layer. The final colour is going to be a pure flat white from that same angle, exactly the same as we did on this test miniature from the previous video. We are isolating the area, we're allowing the white to fall even more than we did with that beige, just to pinpoint the high point of the light. I'm turning him over just to get ever so slight creepings of that white onto the back edge, but we want very little of that. So I've just finished him off with a final layer on the front, and I've let that creep around the front of the blade here, as you can see. You can see just tiny little hints all the way around the back edge of the miniature and on his plumage. And that's exactly the effect that we're wanting. So you can see this side is still more or less that purple and greenish yellow, and this will be retained if we're using thin down paints or glazes or even contrast paints, and it should have a nice little effect throughout the miniature. So we should have learned several things. One, your priming can and should be part of your paint job. Two, shadows are very rarely just black, although undercoating in black is still fine if you're after certain effects. And there's more than one legitimate way to paint, and any way you choose is still just as valid. Every single form has its uses. Don't be scared to experiment.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.